the information war, like you said, the insurgents are trying to create this image of it being successful.
Oh, yeah.
Two-part question. Part one is, how large is it? How important is it? And in part two, how do you help?
Let me answer part two first. What you can do, what our own media can do, is not look for every sensational story. As I was told by a young lady, another reporter who sat in that chair right over there, she was very honest when she looked at me and she said, "Good news isn't news." At that point in time, I said, "Then you and I are through talking, because everything I do has got a good news story to it." So that's there's a side of and you've seen it. You've been here. There is a side of this war that's extremely good news. You're seeing the progress every day. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like it when you're riding in the vehicle behind the one that, it gets hit by an IED. But we've been very fortunate in the number of Marines we've had injured, and even more fortunate in the number we've had killed in this RCT since we took over in mid-March. But you're seeing the progress. You're seeing the progress on the inside of the city. You're seeing people come forward now and tell Marines, "You shouldn't go down here today," or "This guy over here is bad." You're starting to see that. You don't see that on most nightly news stations. And so that's a key piece to what can be done to make it better. The only thing that I ever ask reporters to do two things when they come here. I ask them to, number one, wear the protective gear that they've been given, because when you're with my guys, they feel responsible for you. And if you're wearing your protective gear, then they're not having to turn their attention from what they're doing to making sure you're safe. So that's one of the questions. But the second thing that I ask them is, I ask them to ask them any questions they want to. Just talk to stuff that's in their lane. If you want to talk to a colonel, talk to me. If you want to find out what a PFC thinks, then don't ask him what the colonel's thinking. But take his story. Listen to him. And I don't ever tell the Marines, you can't say this, you can't say this, you can't say this. The only public affairs guidance we give them is, don't speculate about things you don't know about. That doesn't do anything but fuel sometimes the media fire. And I ask them to talk about things that they know about. She told me, she said, "Good news isn't news." Well, then why am I here? The whole reason I'm over here is for a good news story. We're going to be here as long as this is a bad news story. And I got to tell you, we're making a lot of progress. These young guys that are dressed like this out there are making an awful lot of progress to turning this into a good news story. I don't know what they're going to look for news when we finally get the Iraqi security forces where they can completely stand up on their own, and where the people will pick up their broomsticks, a shovel handle, or something else to knock a terrorist in the head around here, which is starting to happen. And so I'm not sure what they're going to do for news after that. But that's the whole reason we're here, is for a good news story, not for a bad news story. So I was relatively disappointed with her, particularly since she represented a fairly prestigious publication. But now, how important is the information operations piece of this thing? It's critical. Because information operations deals with perceptions, deals with the minds of the insurgents. It deals with the minds of the Marine leadership. It deals with the minds of the American public. It deals with the minds of these young men around here who aren't sure, should I support the coalition effort, try to find me a job and be part of this solution, or should I listen to this hype by the insurgents and go fight for a greater, nobler cause? So, if you listen to the enemy's information operations, they pitch this as their nobler cause. We're the enemy, and they find 100 reasons on a day to do that. The attack on Abu Ghraib, so far blown out of proportion from what it really was, that it's It really didn't even, it was a blip. It was an hour and a half blip on the screen where not a soul escaped and not a soul got in. Now, how in the world is that a victory? I mean, that they fired, I mean, we had some Marines wounded. We didn't have any wounded overly seriously, but we had a fair number wounded with fragmentation, shrapnel, things like that. But they were able to, the enemy was able to play that as this great victory, where at the end of the day, the only dead people on the battlefield were insurgents. So, but if it was a big deal to some of these young minds, and if it helped their recruiting people to their cause, then it was a IO victory for them. By the same token, they have a whole lot less rules that they have to go through, and they can use a lot of sensationalism that we can't use. We have made some mistakes. You know all of them. We've made some mistakes with the mistakes of the part of a few, which really hurts our information operations campaign. Because you take a scandal like the Abu Ghraib scandal. Oh, it like to drove the entire detention business over here to its knees. I mean, how many days in a row was that, front page news? And all the time, then that's something else that the other guy is using. See how they treat you. This is the way the Americans are. This is the way the coalition forces are. So is it huge? Absolutely. Perceptions. Perceptions are everything. And what can you do? I'll go back to your second question now. Tell the people back in your part of the world the whole story. Not just the good parts. You can tell them the bad parts, but just tell them the whole story, so that they're not gaining an education and an appreciation and a bank of knowledge off of a 30-minute news clip at night, of which 8 minutes of is commercials and 2 minutes of it is about the war in Iraq. You've got a perspective that a guy that drops in here for 2 days and bounces to 3 parts of Iraq, and he's out of here and he gets one story. You've got a perspective he don't have. You know what their feet smell like when they pull their boots off at night. You know what it's like to take a bottle of water out of the refrigerator, throw it in the Humvee, and a few minutes later you want to throw it out because it's already hot. You also know what it's like when they roll up an IED guy, and that feeling of the teamwork and the euphoria for knowing that they've made a difference. You hear them talk about making this a better country. For who? For those 80 guys? No. They've got hearts this big. They are giving, time out of their youth. They're not water skiing this summer. They're not fishing this summer. They're giving another country, the people of another country, an opportunity to have a small taste of what we have in terms of freedoms to express yourself, freedoms to be part of your own destination in the form of your government, freedoms to choose what schools you can go to, and they're doing this for the women as well as for the men, for the old people as well as the young people. And I think that's what that great society that we were raised in, between the Atlantic and the Pacific. That's why people would rather have Americans helping them than anybody else.